Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to start things today off again with another popping off powered by Jack in the Box, followed by the Justice's recent releases.
And next, we'll be doing our predictions for the May tournaments for both Asia and North American region, and then closing things out with our regular mailbag.
I'm Avast. This is Jayne, and welcome to Contested. Hello, everyone. We are once again not live from the Frontier Communication Studio in Dallas, Texas, though maybe soon. Maybe soon, a very limited opening for us so we can actually get back to the studio and start. We had so many grand plans before COVID hit, and hopefully we can start getting a little bit more of our use of that at studio and some of the plans we had before content-wise. But enough about us. I want to ask about you, Jayne. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastical, I am definitely looking forward to get back into the office. I had a production date set for like next week, so things are definitely opening up. And even though we're not going to have, those homestand opportunities in order to have guests on, at the very least, I can start doing kind of more interviews with the Fuel guys and the Empire guys and the Envy guys. So, just get a lot more kind of content live in the studio with people other than me and you, I suppose,
Yeah, but who doesn't want to see us?
As much as I love you, I think that, not all of our content can just be you and I,
That's fair. People want to hear perspectives from all over. And speaking about things being all over, including the spaghetti that was dropped on the floor by the Dallas Fuel, we have our first popping off, or not our first, but we have our first segment today, the popping off, presented by Jack in the Box. And we are looking here at the Paris Eternal versus the Dallas Fuel on Junkertown second. Already not a great match for the Fuel, all things considered this past week. But then it gets a little bit worse. As Binbest and Hanbin, after they swiftly cap first, walk on up the stairs, uncontested, unscouted, and drop a three-man shatter on the Dallas Fuel on the high ground setting up, including Doha, who is having EMP for that following fight. And then gets three, Hanbin cleans them up, they chase down Closer, and just off that is a fight that is a very quick second as well for Paris Eternal. And Binbest continuing to look like Bin better this season. Looking very, very good.
Did you prepare that pun in advance?
No, people have been using that pun for a while, actually.
Oh, apparently I haven't been paying attention. Yeah, this is not a flattering clip for the Dallas Fuel. The first time I saw it, I was kind of like, what is going on here? There was like, how did they not scout Binbest going on the side with Azaria? But if you look at the clip, they actually moved into position right before they even captured first point. And then even though he didn't crouch walk up the stairs or anything, there was no, they didn't see him coming at all, landed the hammer. Of course, did that follow-up there, and they managed to get pretty much the entire second point off of that. So it was like, considering that setup happened, they lost so much territory on that escort map. That is a pretty rough one. Definitely a high impact play from Binbest there.
Yeah, and it had to hurt watching that because I was like, wow, maybe a fight can be had for the Fuel once, and then they got dominated. So I was like, well, no fights for the Fuel today on Junkertown. But that's just the Paris Eternal looking just really, really good, I think, right now. Paris Eternal are looking like a very strong team. And Sparkle is going to be eligible to play not this week for the May tournament, but for the following week, because his birthday is May 31st. We finally get to see Sparkle, probably the most anticipated, I would say, maybe one of the top 3 most anticipated rookies in the entire league is Sparkle. So I think a lot of people are going to be watching that with a lot of interest.
Yeah, so 10 days until Sparkle can play. I haven't looked at what is the actual first game that he will be debuting in, but definitely going to be looking forward to see how that young prod actually performs on the field.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a general rough week for the Dallas Fuel as well, because Fuel got rolled in the showdown. I think the hydration main tank starting to pay a little dividends for Houston. I think having a much more balanced member, but it's not looking great in recent events at all. I think Houston are actually looking particularly on the up and up after that one. So we'll have to see how they move into the monthly May tournament as well. But it's looking better for them and looking a little bit worse considering that I was considering Fuel to be a solid upper mid-table-ish team. And now they've started to struggle a bit, but it's also a show match. Yeah. And I don't necessarily put a lot of stock into it. It's much like how we watched the early Shanghai Masters show match before the season started. But it actually rang pretty true because Dragons have been consistently looking like one of the best teams, if not the best team in the Overwatch League.
At the same time that you're calling it a show match, it is an extremely important match because that one was between the Dallas Fuel and the Houston Outlaws, and that's not a matchup that they take very lightly. And this one, this was a show match that held a lot of importance for both teams as well because it was actually being broadcast on live television throughout the state of Texas. So this was like a pretty big deal. You know, not these were being broadcast on channels that even the Overwatch League doesn't broadcast on. So it might not have had those, 20 or 30,000 viewers on YouTube, but it was reaching kind of like the actual Texas home audience. So it was, and the other thing about that Monday match, the Texas Showdown, Lone Star Showdown, I think was the name of it, is the fact that match was held without hero pools. And I mean, Dallas is a team that definitely should have won against the Houston Outlaws, but they didn't do that, and it wasn't hero pools. And the May tournament is also not going to have hero pools. So considering how bad they looked during the actual Paris Eternal game, which was, again, certainly, I'm not sure that they were favored to win by any means, but they were certainly favored to look better than they did. And we've seen this before. So at least recently, Dallas Fuel have certainly looked to be on a downward trend, and I don't think there's much indication that that's going to turn around in time for the May tournament.
Someone says Sparkle's first weekend will be the 6th to 7th of June, apparently. So they're not going to actually play him in the fall. Yeah. That's exactly what that's right. My timeline. Yeah. It is. Yeah. Oh no, it's actually the week after next. So
yeah, but so to him, it's just there are no games scheduled for those, so we don't know what team the Paris Eternal are going to play against first with Sparkle. So we know the days, we just don't know. There's nothing on the schedule for those weeks yet.
Sure. And speaking of not being on the schedule, in this case, the schedule to work, we have to talk about Justice. Justice had some recent releases from their staff, which is they released their general manager, Ballin, and also one of their assistant coaches, Banny, formerly a Houston Outlaws player, a support player for them. And it was controversial, I would say. It was controversial.
It's kind of weird that the reason why this was so controversial was the way that the tweet was worded. Let's just cut right to the heart of the matter. If you release an assistant coach and a GM, they have an assistant GM, so maybe they just thought that the assistant GM was going to be doing a better job. And they have a large staff, so maybe they're just cutting down because of COVID-19, the excuse the Los Angeles Valiant did. I think this release would have gone off a lot better if the PR guys hadn't decided to phrase this as if Ballin and Banny conspired to commit murder.
Well, I mean, it wasn't. Yeah, it was just. I made a tweet which rattled some cages, sort of. I guess it was mostly in support, but some, but especially for some people that I really don't care if they're mad at me either.
Yeah,
is that it was we had it. So for example, last year Justice were arguably a lot worse than this year. A lot worse. They were bottom tier league, an absolute joke of a team for 3 stages straight. And their GM quit midseason, Kate. And, she cited a lot of different reasons. But overall, from everything reported from the inside and from the out, it was, and looking at, is a disaster of a team competitively, a disaster of a team financially for the Justice. And it has actually far-reaching implications beyond just that season, leading into this season too, in terms of how the org itself has field, their confidence in, newer GMs moving in, their confidence in contracts and money. And so, but there was no tweet saying, thank God Kate is gone, essentially. There was no tweet like that. But for Ballin, who stayed with the team, and arguably, regardless if they were still doing badly, because they were, I don't think there's any way around it, right? Justice were bad. Yes. They were bad. I don't agree with a lot of their player choices. Their staff choices I was actually kind of big on. I heard a lot of good reviews on. And it's from trusted sources. So, but obviously it lends some things the team and potentially the culture is not looking good here again. But I wasn't big on the roster. I wasn't big on how selected. But then it calls into question at what extent was Ballin associated with building the roster as opposed to the staff, right? No one here for the fuel, I would say. No one targets Tasmo generally for the fuel being bad for 2 seasons straight. No one's really, it always depends. And also it's an effort of how front facing your GM is, right?
Yes.
Some GMs get a lot more flack, or figures get a lot more flack because they're front facing. For example, obviously Ballin or Flame for the Houston Outlaws, Bare Hands, Arrow for the Fuel, who's the head coach, but not the GM, obviously. So it depends how front facing you are. But all things considered, yes, it wasn't good, but it still seemed insanely disrespectful to be thank God they're gone. We're booting them out. Peace. And someone looked at this and reviewed it and said, this was a good tweet. This is a good tweet. Both these people needed to be gone.
Yeah. And it's to read out the tweet, explicitly, it's to better equip our competitive team for success, we're announcing the release of Ballin and Banny from their roles effective immediately. to equip our competitive team for success. You know, that's in no uncertain terms. You're saying that your team is going to be better with the absence of these individuals, which is incredible to say. So, I mean, that's very, very
it's
sort
rough.
of it's rough. It's really rough. And you know, there was a lot of people who were trying to justify this that you know they're going for the more full Korean roster because they have recently signed Stitch and Jono to 14-day contracts, which makes the only member of their team who is not Korean being Envytv, of course, because Lulsish
Still stuck in Sweden. He's
still
technically
stuck-
under contract though.
Yes,
Still
but they've got Roar playing, and you know,
Yeah.
and so it's like, you know, you pick up an off tank, like, you know, or yeah, you pick up an off. Wait, no, it's with
John, who is off
John, who is off tank. Yeah, so he's not even going to be playing, right? So they are absolutely full Korean right now. So both their Swedish members are sitting on the bench. So people were trying to say that, yeah, it's just like, oh, you know, they've gone for a Korean staff. They're just firing them to pick up, you know, Korean support staff. But the list of individuals on this team who are staff members is actually quite large. They're close to the size of the Dallas Fuels, you know, staff team, and the fact that they had a GM. They had Ballin, who is the GM, and they have Pre, who is the assistant GM, who used to be an analyst and was promoted. So, you know, he previously, I have no idea if he has previous management experience, but he was the assistant GM. And then Banny was the individual coach. So he was, of course, a player transition, you know, and it's perfectly reasonable. Maybe you say that, you know, he wasn't as good of a coach as he was as a player or something like that. But they still have John Galt, who is, of course, the head coach, not Korean. He's Singaporean, if I believe. And then they also have two other coaches.
Wiz and Supreme.
Yeah, so
and
those
Supreme
two
was from Spark
are
and
Korean.
Wiz is from XL2.
Yeah. So like they still have you know, a pretty large staff, 2 members who are English speaking, 2 members who are Korean. But regardless, if you are kind of making that decision, if that's the direction you're going, you certainly don't phrase a PR release in the way that the Washington Justice did. There's just no reason to do that.
Yeah, and also there have definitely been, I think, all things considered, I think also we should 100% make some nuance here because we were nuanced with the Titan situation too.
Yes.
The org allowing the roster to explode for Titans was an unmitigated disaster, but it doesn't absolve that there are other sides to the story, right? But it's still an unmitigated disaster. There are also 2 sides, and there are clear results of a roster here that were under Ballin and Banny. But then also it leads, and then also, but then it's still other sides of the story, and we look historically at the org as a whole and everything that's come out from them, and we see how they treated other GMs who were arguably just as disastrous, if not, in my opinion, far more, because of things that really at this point can't even be discussed. But like they were like far more disastrous, and they still were treated with far more respect leaving the organization, even if they quit versus being released. Obviously, it's just a bad look. And on top of that, I think that we also had John Galt come out on Twitter and say, I think Banny is a great coach still.
Yeah.
So clearly with John Galt and the head coach wasn't agreeing with Banny being released if he's saying, I think but granted, he's not going to come out and say Banny's bad.
I mean, there's not necessarily, that doesn't mean he wasn't agreeing to release Bonnie. You can think that he's a good coach, but that he's unnecessary, or
true.
You know, maybe the fact that they were given a budget and be like, oh, what are you going to do about this one? Like somebody's got to go, sort of thing. And then, you know, there is the extreme outward possibility that John is just, you know, not being honest and just saving face so that Banny can get hired again. So like, you never know.
But for me, all things considered, when I've talked to, when I've either spoken to players or I've spoken to other people that have passed through their vicinity, whether they're from other teams or stuff like that, about their staff, it seemed like everyone liked each other on that team. But who really knows, right? Like, obviously, we don't have the full insider scoop necessarily about how it goes down. But I am just not a fan of that release and think it's extremely disrespectful, even if I think stuff need to change.
It was certainly disrespectful. We won't know kind of the truth, or you know, who's so heated that they needed to put out, let alone approve a tweet like that. But I think one of the more interesting pieces of evidence, I guess we can call it, is Corey's tweet. You know, Corey says, damn, if any of you think Lynn and Banny were the problems on that team, then you're terribly mistaken. So, you know, there's 2 things that I can, if I want to be like super CSI detective Horatio Kane level of conspiracy, you know, it's, you know, if you think that they were the problem on the team, first of that definitely says that there is a problem and that it was not with Lynn or Banny. And then the second thing, I think the wording, the problem on that team probably means that it's internal. And with that team, I would assume would be like ownership group or management. So that's kind of super conspiratorial, but, it seems like there are problems. It is coming from within the house. And that, maybe this is just Corey disagreeing with the way that Washington has decided to try and fix whatever problem they're facing.
And also, I have to say, I just have to put out here because once again, this is a manner of just being professional. And the topic of professionalism is I did see a high-ranking member of their organization, which essentially, unlike the tweet, like a tweet directly shitting on Ballin and her release and saying she was bad. So a high-ranking member of the Justice organization liking a tweet saying that your recent release of Ballin and she was really bad at her job is not a good look professionally.
Do you have a link to that? I didn't see that.
I have the screen cap. I have the screen cap still. Wow. I have seen it. It has been sent to me, and I think that is an extremely unprofessional move.
Yeah,
and they've since unliked the tweet, so you can't see it on their profile, but that's an extremely unprofessional move from the Justice, and I don't agree with it at all. At all. I think that is so inherently unprofessional. On top of what I already said, and yes, by the way, I did see Kate, the previous GM of Justice, getting very mad at me, and I don't care, Kate. I really don't care. I literally could not give less than a crap about what your opinion, because nothing is good. And also, I understand that there are circumstances outside your control too with the org, but it's just like you had probably just no. We're not even gonna go there actually, because we'll get down a tangent that will be too bad. We're not even gonna go there. So no.
I was gonna say, like, you don't even need to justify yourself. You just feel like I don't care and stuff.
No,
but yeah, okay. Well, that was way spicier than I thought. I didn't realize that had happened. That there was kind of some, that like is kind of slimy and disappointing. It's like, it's not surprising, I guess. There have been a lot of examples of really kind of like slimy and bitter people kind of doing things like this. Like,
this doesn't mean that it's like, obviously, I don't think that like we obviously still have a very one-dimensional view of things, and certainly. Also if I'm Justice, I understand being very frustrated too, because their second year where there is also people saying like, Justice budget. No, Justice have been consistently a team that has spent a lot of money. Yeah, and that's also why I imagine they're very frustrated too, is that on top of that, now their homestands have been canceled by COVID on top of that.
Yes.
So I understand actually, as an organization run by people looking for results and are results driven and spending a lot of money and not getting them is insanely frustrating, especially after year one, where I would argue that the trust between endemic esports people coming in and this VC group that owns the Justice has been shattered totally, and they were very burned by that season. So I understand that there's a lot of other issues at play here, but it's more of a matter of professionalism than it is a matter of just like the actual release. It is really the point and the sticking point for me about the whole issue.
Just a minor correction. I don't think it is a VC group that owns Washington.
Well, it's a sports team ownership or something, right? Isn't that still a VC group? I'm not sure. I can't remember. Okay.
Minor correction.
Minor.
Not every single team in the league is owned by a VC
but fair,
group.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's really and then at this point it's now of where do the Justice go from here, right? A lot of people are speculating it's going full Korean move. I actually don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's a 50-50. I've heard a lot of news circulating that there is no guarantee it goes full Korean. There could be a stopgap. They have a lot of Korean players in the meantime, but that's a weird stopgap because also both Jonu and Stitch are in Korea, not in the States, and are playing our high ping. So there is still a chance they do go full Korean since they have a lot of Korean staff members and Korean players. But I do think that there is strong potential that it does not necessarily go that way at all. And it's just depending on what the org is feeling moving forward. Because I think, let's take, for example, the Defiant. The Defiant started Korean season 2, did not have a great season, and now have gone in a much more Western direction, especially Canadian direction, generally at the behest, it seems like, of the ownership group. And you could argue to what success. I don't think the Defiant have been good, but they have built a much stronger brand.
Yeah.
And that could matter a lot more to them. It depends on what Justice wants out of their ownership moving forward and out of their team.
This is a kind of a belief that's gotten me a lot of hatred and people have called me racist for. But, when you're having teams that are going towards Korean rosters, the primary reason that you're picking up those players is because they are better. The Korean contender scene, definitely the best of any of the Korean contenders scene, but only one team at the end of the day can win. And I think that there's definitely other reasons and other factors you need to take into account when building a roster. So I think that Toronto Defiant going with more Western players, especially, a lot of the Canadian players when they are a Canadian team, was really smart. And at the end of the day, it being a business, I think that was probably a very strong business decision. I don't think that especially they went to Korean roster to try and be competitive, weren't competitive, going for a more marketable or relatable team for a Canadian audience with Canadian players just makes sense.
Yeah, it depends. Also, we would have to see a lot of the numbers, right? Because there's like a lot of uh dependencies, right, that have to be
Hmm.
accounted for. It's like, because also, by the way, I haven't heard this move. It sounds like to me it hasn't been a hugely like prohibitively expensive for the Defiant, but obviously there was a lot of star power names are picked up that had buyouts, and it was still expensive to a degree, as
Oh,
opposed to,
certainly.
like, let's say, like the London Spitfire or the Valiant, who really had a much more budget season. And so it just depends on where the intersection of profitability and marketability meet competitiveness for these
Hmm.
teams. And we simply don't have those numbers always. So and also what their long term goal is, right? And I do agree that not every team can win, but I also don't think that you always have to sacrifice marketability for going a roster move that, like, is more easily like disseminated within your market, right? Because, like, New York have done fine with marketing their players. I would say that you definitely have options to make. So I mean, Valiant with Kariv, who's now with Defiant, did a great job of helping put those personalities out there. So it just depends on how. I think a big part of it is how equipped is the organization behind it to make the infrastructure moves necessary to actually market those players effectively, and if they feel like that's better for them than just picking up English speaking players, you
Yeah,
know?
New York did it extremely well with their roster. I think that they did, quite a lot, quite a few local events, probably the most out of any team in the first season. They have a good organization backing them up. They've done a lot of kind of crossovers with other groups, like the merch stuff specifically sticks out to me. But then, on the other hand, when you're trying to build kind of like a global localized league, and you have the London Spitfire wanting to celebrate their win in Seoul Dynasty, or in Seoul rather. Yeah, that's kind of like an interesting turn on things. So yeah, certainly some teams have done it better than others, and just being a Korean roster doesn't mean that you can't eventually, have those players be related to. It's like, it's the same thing, for example, in hockey, where it's like there's a lot of Swedish or Finnish players who play for Canadian teams. It is
Mhm.
about kind of building up that relatability. But if you are kind of just having Korean players play from Korea, not ever trying to be a part of the city or the team that's building up this kind of local area, then yeah, it's not going to go your way unless you win. But it's going to be, the more teams that go in the league, there's still can only ever be one winner. But everyone, it's a business. Everybody's a business. So you got to make sure that you've got a way to succeed if you don't win. It seems to be
And I
just
think
the
that's one of the
prudent.
criticisms for Titans as well as an organization with their roster, is that it clearly seemed by their own press releases that they were not equipped to deal with having a full Korean roster.
Yes.
And also COVID didn't help. I would say COVID was probably a big factor of that, and it was never expected for them to necessarily have infrastructure in place in Korea previously.
Hmm.
But it's very clear this is an organization that didn't really understand what they're getting into and how they wanted. They just were like, well, I want to win, so let's pick up these guys. And they didn't build out the necessary support infrastructure to support the players, to support the staff, and also then expected that it would just all fall into place, which is not really the case. And I think, and I don't know how much of it speaks to malice or just inexperience with
I would
dealing with
hope
that.
none of it is
So,
malice, but
yeah,
man,
it's more of it. I think a lot of it has to do with just inexperience in this space, which would be like a very classic. If I had Monte Cristo, I could hear the echoing cries of Monte Cristo right now of rallying against investment groups. I don't know anything about esports currently. I can hear it ringing in my ears. I can hear it. But it's definitely a perfectly valid criticism, I think, of the Titans too, and potentially, depending on what direction we go, the justice. But we'll just have to see as that pans out.
Mhm. And you know what
Just have to
else we
see.
were going to see pan out? The main tournament this weekend.
That's true. We are going to see that pan out.
Hmm.
I think probably, if you guys didn't see too, I think they Overwatch League just announced there was a creator challenge to make frag movies for the
Yeah,
main
they did see
tournament.
that.
It's like a $3,000 chance, a chance to win $3,000 for the best tournament, or best
Best
tournament, like
tournament.
not
It
best
was
tournament,
best frag movie. Best
best
frag
frag
movie.
movie about the tournament, which I think is really cool because I actually like I think in general, a lot of people's complaints about the Overwatch League, and one that I echo, is that it doesn't empower grassroots creators or personalities quite as much as it should, and the organizations that sort of support it from the ground up. And I think having this contest is a very minor, decent first thing to add to other changes that need to go forward, right?
Yeah, the Overwatch League has definitely been improving their content as well as been improving the way that they actually work with content creators. I'm a little bit bitter it took them this long, but at least they're doing it, sort of thing. Along with the CarQ and Your Overwatch videos that they both sponsored and then put on the actual Overwatch website in order to try and give players a little bit more of an introduction, not only to ways to play the game, but also to the Overwatch content creation side of things. I think that was really good. And, I see SI Not Found actually in chat. So hello to you, my friend.
SI Not Found? Yeah. There he is.
He's right in our chat. Right there.
Wow.
But, people, of course, have been very, very impressed by his montages. He submitted one to Guess My SR, which was pretty incredible. He spent like 80 hours editing it. But hopefully, at least... you'll see other creators come out as well. And regardless, I hopefully when they actually do give out the prize, it's not just like, here's 3K. Like, hopefully they, do the thing where they showcase maybe the top 5 or something like that. Because if people are going to be putting in the effort, if it's just money and no kind of publicity, especially for kind of content creators, the main thing that they want is attention and views. So hopefully they make a big showing of this where, they show more than just the finalist, and they do kind of a countdown and give people credit who put in. So, it's kind of like, we'll have to see the execution. If it's just giving 3K to SIF Not Found, then like, sure, yay, good for him. He deserves it. But, it's definitely a way that we could see more creators emerge almost. If somebody completely unknown comes out and makes something fantastic, that could be the start of a new member of the content creation community for Overwatch. So yeah,
they also announced tokens being back too, which is on a juicy piece of news for that. We're getting to the actual competitive side of the May tournament soon enough, but I think this is a big enough point that we have to spend some time talking about is tokens, because it pretty much got leaked through like the CDL changes, like, we're getting in-game rewards, and this is before Overwatch League announced anything itself. But tokens are finally coming back for in-game viewership, which is something they've been promising since the beginning of the season. And I'll be real, I was like, there's no way it's going to take this long. And now we're in...
Really? You thought that?
And now we're close to June.
Do you remember how long it took it to get it on Twitch in the first place?
Well, but because it was very clear, I would have thought that was an identified problem, which it sounded like it was, that they had identified this issue.
I don't think there was any problems. I think the thing that solved all problems was that they got $190 million from YouTube.
160.
Okay, I've heard conflicting numbers, but at least the lowest number I've heard is 160. So, it's kind of like, to hell with tokens.
I mean, but we still need tokens, and like, there's this whole argument of odd viewership and live.
Do you even need viewers when you're getting $160 million?
That's true. Do you need viewers when
Do you need viewers? Do you really need viewers?
I think you do need viewers, because that money doesn't go that far if you think about it. Like, even if it was, because I'm fairly sure that's not even an Overwatch League total deal. That's like Overwatch League and CDL. So it's split between 2 different franchises, which obviously operate as 2 different entities. And there's 20 teams in the Overwatch League that bought in at least at around 20 million a piece or something, right? Mm-hmm. So that money disappears pretty fast.
It's I'm sure that the pros and cons were weighed. It's definitely, this is something that the business side of Activision Blizzard, like, out of all of the criticism that I throw the way of Blizzard and of the Overwatch League and Overwatch itself, like, the one thing that Blizzard Activision has done really, really well with is the business side of the Overwatch League, convincing this wide variety of groups to buy into the Overwatch League at a minimum of like $20 million, and getting this on TV and broadcast on Disney XD and ESPN, and getting a deal with Twitch, then getting a deal with YouTube. Like, their business side is really doing quite impressively, considering how much criticism they have got. So
it's like that meme. It's like the crying face is like, no, you can't just make $160 million for your dead game. And then it's like Overwatch League, like, finance offices going, money printer, go brrr.
Money printer, go brrr. That's like, yeah. So, like, so what if people don't have tokens? Probably one of the main reasons that they want tokens to get back is so that they can actually get more viewership. It's like, even if 10,000 people start AFKing the channel for tokens, like, is that, I guess they do technically get to count that for advertiser revenue, but like, sure. But, we still, even if we get tokens back, I'm amazed that people have not just been crying bloody murder about not having the command center back. You know, like,
I mean, I agree with you. I think losing Command Center was a blow, especially since like
I mean, people
people
paid money for that.
paid money for it. Like that actually seems like kind of a scumaz. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna lie.
that was 100% a scam.
I remember there was I had a conversation on with a person on Twitter that bought it, and I was like, yeah, if you don't get Command Center back, I actually kind of think that's a problem.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of messed up, I have
And
to
it
say.
specifically said it wasn't like when it bought it. I am pretty sure that it wasn't supposed to be just for the season. It was supposed to be just you got this thing. Like, I'm so sad it's gone. Like, at least we have a client now, sort of thing. But man.
Yeah, we do have a client, which is nice. And so with actually having a client is good. But also, I'm either way, right? Like,
yeah. Either way,
just not a good time. Just not a good time.
I mean, and the other thing about this token things is that it's not really the return of tokens. You know, if you was
because didn't people buy it because people are saying that it was for the season though, Jayne. But didn't people buy it pre-season, or was that, or are people just telling me, or are people just telling me that
I have trouble
people
remembering
complaining
what
for
I
no
did
reason?
last week, but yeah,
like
anyway,
for season 3, were there features already available?
No, it wasn't announced for 2020.
Oh, then why is everyone complaining? You've already bought it for 2 seasons. What? I've been totally scammed myself. everyone, the arguments here implied to me that if you purchase it for season 3, so what the hell are these people complaining about? You haven't even bought the product. Why are you upset? Huh? Have I been scammed? Then what the hell is all this outrage for? Why were people yelling at me saying Control Center like I got scammed? I'm tired of people.
Are you okay? You want to take a breather? Want to go for a walk?
I'm very upset because I was actually like getting worked up about like, oh, there's no Command Center, and now I'm like, and now people are just complaining because they're idiots. Okay, whatever. Whatever. Okay, go. Now let's do predictions. Let's get the predictions.
I mean, the other thing about the tokens, last thing about the tokens is that they're not actually on YouTube.
Oh.
You know, if you watch on YouTube, you still won't get token drops.
Where are you getting it from? The client?
The Overwatch League website and app.
Oh. Well.
So
okay.
So, just to throw that one out there.
Well, that's also something. That's also a specific I didn't learn, but it's something, I guess.
Yeah,
Still not ideal. Still not ideal. Well, let's move into predictions now, Jayne, because we spent a lot of time molding and not a lot, specifically myself, and not a lot of time actually talking about the game.
This episode is definitely heavy on the molding. So.
Yeah, we have a lot of molding this episode, but we need to talk about the predictions.
Are we starting with the Asia region or the North
I think
American?
we go down I think we start with the Asia region because there's more games in NA. So let's start with the Asia region. Okay. Is my view on it. So first, let's go through our brackets.
Yes.
It's Spark Dynasty, and also John Spector himself has assured that Spark is playing.
Yes.
In this tournament. So we'll see what's going on with the Spark exactly. But then, Excelsior, Hunters, Dragon Spitfire, because there's only one buy in the Asia region. It's Charge, who's first seed, and they go to semis. Mm-hmm. And then everything else, they have to work their way into it. So, like, let's roll it down. Spark Dynasty, Jayne.
Dynasty.
How are you feeling?
I mean, like, I want it to be the Dynasty so badly, but the Dynasty have disappointed so many times. I think they're still going to take it, but my God, that's like, the good thing is that whoever makes it through this bracket doesn't overly matter, but I don't really think that the Dynasty have completely recovered from their absolute horrific kind of drop sort of thing, especially since the last match we saw again was they got 3-0'd by the Chengdu Hunters, right? So, like, as much as
now there are no hero pools, remember, Jayne. So technically, Dynasty could just go back to their training wheels and say, like, double shield. Time to training wheels.
I mean, yeah, but as like I do kind of have I don't kind of have I do have the Seoul Dynasty predicted as actually winning this match, but my God, that is not one that I'm going to be confident in.
You have I actually have the reverse. I think Spark's winning.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a sane, reasonable person, that's what I'd say too. But
I'm not feeling confident. I was a big Dynasty. I was, as they say, a Dynasty simp for a little bit.
Oh, were you? Yes.
But I have lost faith in this team to execute anything outside of double shield at times.
Yeah.
And so I'm just gonna have to think. I think Spark is a far more well-rounded roster, and also if Architect plays.
You think Spark is a more well-rounded roster
currently than Dynasty? Yes, I do. Currently in Dynasty right now, yes, I do.
Okay, just based off of performance, not based off.
I think because the thing is, like, we can look at a roster and be like, these players' talents are more well-rounded, but if it's not about on paper, right? It's about how you execute it. Okay. And so far, Spark seems like a far more well-rounded team in terms of their executing, and they've gotten even better with the addition of Architect, who I think is a lot better player than Bazzi was. And
yeah, I mean
adds a lot more
that's
depth.
no argument. Like Bazzi was a decent player certainly, but not architect level. So yeah. I had forgotten to include the architect signing, so that makes my prediction probably even stupider. But you know what? I'm gonna hold out hope and stick to my guns and say that Seoul Dynasty have not gone completely pants on head. So you know what? I think they'll eke it out. What about the Excelsior versus the Hunters? Who you got?
I mean, it's a pretty obvious choice for me.
The Hunters all the way!
No,
Woo!
that is not the obvious choice. That is not the obvious choice. There was one conditional statement here. There was one conditional statement here with this game. If Who Are You plays, New York loses, I think. That is my conditional statement. I think if Who Are You plays, New York loses. But if they play Libero, they win. So that's how I feel about the New York Hunters game.
Okay, well, no, I don't actually think the Chengdu Hunter. I think they're going to get absolutely smashed by New York. You know, I don't really. I sold all my New York stocks quite a long time ago, and still don't hold them in the highest of regards. But you know, Hunters, as much as I wish that my love and support for the Hunters mattered at all, but no, they're going to get smashed pretty hard. Okay, Dragons versus Spitfire. Who you got?
Dragons. I mean, it's not even close. I mean, okay. I'm not even going to talk about that. That's just Dragons all the way.
Okay.
Dragons all the way through the sky.
And before we go back up to the top of the bracket, the next one is going to be Excelsior versus Dragons. Now that one was an interesting one. What do you think's going on here?
You know, I do think people are still underestimating New York, especially when they played. I mean, and also I guess another part of the conditional statement is Who Are You plays May. God forbid I have to watch Who Are You play May.
Yeah.
But I do overall think that Dragons have the far better team. I think they have a far better cohesion currently this year. And so I feel confident that Dragons should still win that matchup, no matter if it's the optimal lineup for New York or not. Mm-hmm. So I would still take Dragons.
Yeah, I think this is going to be definitely a close one. You know, the Dragons faced off, I want to say 3 weeks ago against the New York Excelsior, and that game did go to map 5. So the last, they played very recently, and it was a very, very close match. But yeah, I'm not definitely, but I'm definitely. Wow.
What are you definitely, huh?
I'm definitely giving up on.
You are definitely a man.
Dragons are going to win.
Definitely love Hunters.
Dragons are going to win. My brain just short circuited.
Dragons are going to win. So we're going to put Dragons there into finals. So Charge Spark, I have Charge winning that matchup.
I think it doesn't matter who advances there. Charge wins.
It doesn't matter who advances there. Why? Because you think at the end they just get rolled by Dragons?
It doesn't matter who advances into that semifinal against the Charge.
Oh, yeah.
Charge will roll Spark just as hard as they'll roll Dynasty. So yeah. I think Charge are going to the finals.
Yeah, I think Charge go to finals too. And then Charge Dragons, my heart says Charge because I like the team.
But your body says?
But Dragons are too good. I think Dragons just look like such a great... The one thing I will say for Charge is that there is hope. They do have options to exploit the Dragons, in particular by sometimes if they can find... If Li Gong is trying to go for Li Gong things and set up plays a lot, and they punish him, because also this was something that happened for most, when you have really aggressive Lucio players, this is something that can actually happen kind of frequently, because we saw it with IDK with the Spark before. We saw it with Cruz back when he was a player for the Paris Eternal. Absolutely. In Season 2, is that over-aggressive Lucio players can be punished. They can be beaten. I'm using Darkest Dungeon quotes now. I don't know why. But the point is that I think overall, though, that the Dragons should have a far better team. And I think Li Gong is a good enough player to where he knows when to rein in his aggression and not let it consume him.
Yeah.
So definitely Dragons. Do you agree? Overall, I think
they don't have Nero.
Don't have Nero.
Yeah. So because they don't have Nero, I'm favoring the Dragons. I think this one is one that is close enough that it could go either way. But with the lack of Nero, I definitely think that it's Dragons favored to take the final.
Yeah, and also I think they have some deficiencies in their hero pool too. I think looking at players like Happy and specifically, I don't think they're quite as flexible as the Dragons lineup.
Yeah, certainly.
I also really do think that the Dragons tank line is not necessarily straight better, but also once again probably a little bit more flexible across all the roles and more consistent. So I feel confident in the Dragons tank lineup too. So overall, Dragons ahead, and that's Asia bracket. We have Dragons winning.
There's a hot take in chat. Fel Batista says that I think Charge are going to lose in the semis no matter who they play. No matter who they play. Okay, hot take, Fel Bautista. I'm gonna remember that, and if you're right, I will sell you my hat. But
they get generally what I do is if someone has a crazy hot take and it comes out true, I give them VIP and the channel. But I don't know. But I don't know if we can
make that happen.
We can make it happen. We have to make it. Right?
I am gonna copy Fel Batista down. Anybody else with crazy, terrible hot takes about the Asia bracket?
Just people complaining about their VIPs in my channel now.
Yeah. Okay. Fel Batista, we've got your pred down. Okay, time up.
All right, NA region. And also, I think we're going to plan... Are we going to publish our bracket? Are we going to publish this bracket on Twitter? I think we will. I will. I'm filling it out as I go. So if we don't do it on the Envy actual channel, I will publish it. And maybe we'll get a sick retweet there. But let's move to the NA bracket.
Sick retweet. Okay. NA bracket.
We have to do the qualification match to start out with you. Titans Defiant.
I mean, it's got to be Defiant.
That is a clash of the century right there. That's a clash of the century.
The Defiant aren't, like, they're 12th, but they're not nearly as bad as the Vancouver Titans. Like, they've had some close games. Two of their last 3 games have been map 5s. Am I going crazy, or is that true?
And they only take
quick fact check.
Let's do a fact check.
No, it was one game 5 against Los Angeles Valiant, but then they took a map off the Shock and the Gladiators. Yeah. Neither of those were blowouts. Like, they're, the fact that they're 12th in the month of May, their opponents were the Los Angeles Valiant, the San Francisco Shock, and the Los Angeles Gladiators. Like, those are good, decent, well, Gladiators. But back then, those were good teams. Those are decent, I would say, above average teams. So the fact that Toronto Defiant is last with a hard schedule, it's not like they're the Florida Mayhem who played Boston twice and got the top seed. Yeah, I think that Toronto Defiant, I don't think it's a no-brainer that they win this match.
I think overall I tend to agree. I think the gap between Titans and everyone else in the league right now is massive. I had hope. I had hope for this squad, but they are hamstrung by a lot of different issues, including coming in mid-season, but their ping. The Adamas Esports training facility is not one of those issues. It's world class. But
I didn't have hope for this team when they first started. I have hope that in the future they'll improve, but right now there's no hope. Like,
yeah, there's no
put your head down, nose to the grindstone, try and not be shit within the shortest duration of time possible, because right now there's no other option.
Yeah, there's not your best case scenario is to make it out alive. For the Titans,
try and hold on to your dignity and confidence for as long as time while you're grinding up to the level that you should have been at, in order to participate in the Overwatch League in the first place. There's a lot of other things to build up, like team synergy and coordination and blah 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 blah. Especially since they didn't just buy a roster wholesale, they mishmashed rank 1 and rank 2 NA contenders. Which, anyway, enough about that. We've got Toronto winning that one. If they don't, I am gonna have some serious questions for the Toronto Defiant. So they win that one, and that means that the Paris Eternal are going to pick their opponent. Who do you think they're picking?
Well, if I'm Eternal, obviously you're ideal for all these seeds now, because once again, there's no, for everyone that isn't aware, but I'm assuming you probably are aware if you're watching, but the seeds from now on in the knockouts they pick the opponents they play against. And so they have a pick between 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th seed for Eternal, and they have the first pick. So they could very well choose the winner of the Defiant Titans match, or they could choose, looking through it, they could choose Uprising, Justice, or Outlaws.
Who do you pick if you're the Paris Eternal?
If I'm the Eternal, I definitely, because you get to see the result, obviously, of the qualification match. So if the Defiant Titans match is at all close, you 100% pick Defiant.
Oh, yeah, if it's close. Defiant. If it's close, you pick Defiant.
100%. I think then if it is not close, then it becomes a toss-up for me between... It becomes a toss-up for me at that point between Uprising and Justice.
Yes, and I think with Boston on the upswing, with their pickup of Punk, and they performed pretty well. They beat the Gladiators, despite Gladiators also being kind of on the downswing. And with the Washington Justice's difficulties with their releases and their staff changes, like, just pick the team in chaos and watch them fall apart. If the Eternal were good enough to utterly smash the Fuel 3-0, like, they shouldn't have troubles with pretty much any of these teams. Oh. But the Justice are going to just make sure that their opponents don't have any kind of free rides to the next round. So.
I think Justice is probably by far, depending on the outcome of the Defiant Titans match, I think Justice is by far the safest bet. simply because they have players on high ping, even if they're really good players. Like the ping advantage is just not to be overstated. Because Boston could just come out with a wild card, and yes, they picked up a new player too. They picked up a new main tank.
Mickey, right?
Is it Mickey or Mikey?
Mikey, I think you're correct.
It was Mikey.
And he's primarily like the Winston Ball stuff, right? So Fusions is looking really good, especially on the Reinhardt. So they picked up a complementary to Fusions to kind of patch those weaknesses, especially with Axiom basically out of commission. So I think that
I think
Boston
Justice is the pick.
Boston looked pretty good against the Gladiators, and they just picked up a new player to patch a weakness. Like, is that really one you want to kind of roll the dice on? If you're the Bears,
and also you know for a fact you can prepare for this Justice squad. You don't know exactly what's gonna happen for Boston, right? Like,
yes.
Mikey could come out swinging, and they could just suddenly, like, obviously I don't find it possible. I think Boston are still gonna be pretty bad, but like they could come out and just be lords of the locker room over here. Like it could. It's possible. So I think Justice is a far safer pick, unless Defiant struggle against the Titans, in which case you take them to pound town.
Yeah, like if Toronto doesn't 3-0 Titans, pick them.
Yeah, 100%. All right, we'll move. So we both agree that they're going to pick Justice probably. And what would be our outcome? What would be our outcome?
Between the Eternal and Justice, Eternal 3-0.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It's punching babies. Anyway, Atlanta Reign would be the next to pick. Who are they going to pick up?
Well, remember, this isn't our bracket. Our bracket.
Neither of us can speak today.
Neither of us can speak today. So this is our bracket. So assuming that Justice is gone and Titans are gone, Reign could really go either way, but I think the safer bet once again is you pick Boston. Probably.
Yes, I would agree as well. Boston. Like it again determines whether or not Toronto performs as expected or if they struggle. But I think that Uprising is definitely the pick that the Reign should go against.
Right, you definitely go Boston there because that that overall Boston, they have been doing great still. Defiant have still had some great times. It's been okay. Houston are looking up. You pick Boston, new player, because also even though they do have new players that could get a lot better, they could also be lacking even more whatever synergy Boston had before, which was somewhat actually versus the Gladiators.
Yeah.
So it just depends realistically. But definitely Boston, and we both agree probably Reign wins that match. Like pretty decisively, I think.
Pretty decisively. Regardless of how good Boston has been improving, I think Reign wins that match. Okay, next one would be the Los Angeles Gladiators. They can either pick, according to us, the Houston Outlaws or the Toronto Defiant. Who would you pick if you were the Gladiators?
This is tough because Gladiators are on the downswing.
Yes.
Also, we also haven't touched upon this fact, but the meta is not going to be the same for this tournament necessarily that's been before.
No.
Because it's no hero pools, and generally a lot of teams have been focusing on like everyone reporting is like an echo dive side of type of strategy. I don't necessarily think that is the 100% yes you play echo strategy. But if let's just be under this assumption that it's a lot of Echo Sombra or Echo Tracer, then we have to think a lot about the dive centric style. I think there's plenty of chances for teams to defeat that. Like if you play Echo Dive and you just play like and if you play like a very solid Brigida comp or even a Lucio Moira, and then you have like a Kree and things like that, you can kind of destroy the dive a lot of times. In a Brigida, like you have options to pretty much destroy the dive if you play it very properly there, especially with Double Shield or even Ryan Diva. Yeah. So I don't necessarily think that's like the end all be all, but it's looking very likely that'll be played a lot. But I think Gladiators you pick. For me, I would rather pick Defiant. I'd rather pick Defiant because Houston just annihilated Fuel. Granted, it was a show match, but they are looking better. And Defiant has also had these weird swings of inconsistency, while Houston has been consistently bad, at least, and just now have started to have an upswing. I definitely pick Defiant, I think. 100%. Yeah.
I think that, there's certainly the argument to be made for picking the Houston Outlaws, especially since they did play in that show match. It was, a best of 7, so there was a lot of matches being played. How the Houston Outlaws were playing, so you have at least some scouting material. It's scouting material that's less than a week old, which is very, very rare, especially scouting material that is actually relevant to the hero pools that you're actually going to be playing on, being no hero pools. So I think the argument is to be made that the Houston Outlaws could be the pick for the Los Angeles Gladiators, but I think that Defiant is probably the more prudent pick as well, since you'll be able to see, what they're playing, maybe not after a week of improvements, since you'll have watched the qualification match as well. So Gladiators picking Defiant makes sense, but certainly not a guaranteed pick.
Yeah, and they have shown that there's some hope for them. There's some building blocks to be had for Gladiators on an Echo Dive strategy, which I think would be far. I mean, I don't know, because also Houston on top of that, I think the Echo Dive is something they can feel pretty confident in, because with hydration being the main tank, or even Movement coming back for dive, like a dive centric style for them with Meko and Dante could be very powerful. So I do think that's something to say there. And also someone says, but doesn't that say that they're afraid of Boston? But the problem is that Gladiators doesn't get to pick Boston in our bracket because they've already been picked.
Yes,
this is our bracket as we're predicting it.
In Boston our bracket, the Atlanta Reign picked the Boston Uprising.
Yes. So they obviously don't have an option for Boston, and they pick after Reign, because these picks go in sequential order, chat. So Eternal get first pick, then Reign, then Gladiators, and then followed up by Fuel. And so then Fuel. And then also, what if they pick Gladiators Defiant? I actually think that could be a toss-up.
Yeah, it's definitely a toss-up, but leaning towards the Gladiators. It depends on sort of how much trouble the Gladiators are actually in. We talked about it on Tuesday, where the Gladiators, lost in map 5 to the Boston Uprising, and there were some signs that this could signal a larger downward trend for the Los Angeles Gladiators. So we don't know if that's true or if they'll bounce back. Is it going to be a dead cat bounce? Is it going to be them keep kind of falling into the pit of horrific Overwatch play? Who knows? But I think the Gladiators are favored, but that's certainly more of a toss-up.
Yeah, it's a very much, it also depends on it depends on both the version of which parallel universe of these teams show up, because like Defiant can chaos theory themselves to some crazy scenario where they're pretty good. Gladiators showed up and were good early in the season and can suddenly show up and be explosive again, or they can be the team that lost to Boston. Like there is this weird array of different versions of both squads that we see, and their varying consistencies. So I tend to favor Gladiators, but it is definitely not impossible for Defiant to win.
It blows my mind that we're even having to have this conversation. It really shows you just how weak the Gladiators have been recently. I think didn't I mention it very early on in the season, that one of the things that I respected about the Gladiators, that they were always kind of like consistently that gatekeeper team. It was kind of like you had to beat us in order to participate in playoffs. And now they're not even close to that. So, which is really weird, especially with the OG Space duo and a lot of other things that were on paper going for them, but rough season for them.
And you know what that leaves? That leaves Fuel playing Houston again.
Yeah.
In our bracket because they don't have a choice. Every other team's been picked. And that did not go well for them.
We get an extra Lone Star Showdown. And I think that I don't believe that there is really any reason to expect a different result than we saw on Monday between these two teams. It was a 4-2. If you did not watch the Lone Star Showdown, if you're interested, I think the VODs are up on both the Dallas Fuel and the Houston Outlaws YouTube channels. But it was a long match, and the Dallas Fuel won some maps, but especially later on, like on Blizzard World, I think it was specifically, the Dallas Fuel even got spawn camped at one point for over 2 minutes. So there were portions where the Houston Outlaws looked really good. Dante looked fantastic on Echo. Again, the meta for that match was primarily double shield. A lot of the Echo Ashe, some Echo Hanzo, some Hanzo Tracer. There was some Tracer and Doomfist actually on the side of the Dallas Fuel, but it was unfortunate watching the Dallas Fuel play that one, as well as their result against the Paris Eternal, where they really struggled to have any sort of kind of good showing against the Eternal, going 3-0. I think that this one, if it does turn back into another battle for Texas, I think that the Outlaws do take this one.
You think so? I think Outlaws have a huge confidence boost right now. I think they're feeling pretty good heading into playoffs or into the tournament. I also think that if it is an Echo Dive type of composition, I think that it favors Houston's players as well a bit. And so it's tough for me because on one hand, yes, Fuel kind of got clapped in the show match towards the end, and they didn't have a good showing versus Paris. But I look at the overall state of the Fuel roster, and I should say this roster should be better. Roster should be better.
Yeah. I mean, they should have had better showings against the Paris Eternal. They should have won the show match against the Houston Outlaws. You know, it's like if you make the argument that teams didn't try during the Lone Star Showdown, that means that the Houston Outlaws shouldn't have tried. The Dallas Fuel shouldn't have tried. And it should have been, you know, you still should have had that relative balance of teams. But like the rivalry between the Dallas Fuel and the Houston Outlaws is very real. Both teams care about it. Both orgs care about it. And teams definitely would have tried during that one, especially since it was a big deal with it being broadcast on TV. You know, it's like in order to actually showcase your team in order to these local audience that maybe haven't been exposed to esports yet. Like, yeah, this was a big deal. The teams tried. Dallas lost. That sucks for me, for the org, for the team. But you know, especially with recent results. You know, if you're saying that Lone Star Showdown results don't matter towards these predictions, then try and justify the loss against the Paris Eternal. Were they not trying during that match either?
Yeah. Now, granted, also different. It could be a slightly different meta that we're heading into. I'm gonna actually go the inverse. So you're going Houston. I still think that overall, I favor the Fuel heading into it.
Yeah.
Now, it does not mean that Houston can't just come out and roll them again. I think it's very possible. But and if Fuel lose this matchup, then 100% what happens for me too is they plummet swiftly down the power rankings, because this has shown that they're not consistent enough, that their lack of consistency and their lack of yielding results means that they cannot really be a contender to be mid-table. So if they get rolled or if they lose, they are going super, super, super far down, because I am not feeling great about, because I still don't feel great about Houston overall as an organization or as their general depth. So I still favor the Fuel, but it is not. But I definitely think that if Fuel lose, they are going so much further down in the power rankings, and we can't trust them ever again.
If Fuel loses this game, like, which I am predicting them to do, which is primarily based off of recent results within the last week. You know, if the last week of the Dallas Fuel hadn't existed, I think that on paper and at least historically, the Dallas Fuel should be better and would have been better. But like the Paris Eternal match combined with the Lone Star Showdown, specifically against the Houston Outlaws and the exact same hero pools, if it were any other week, I would predict this the other direction. And like the Houston Outlaws have had no good results recently in order to justify them being the better team. You know,
other than the Lone Star Showdown, obviously.
This is Fuel's match to lose, right? You know, the Houston Outlaws have a win against the Vancouver Titans, woo, and then they got smashed by the Atlanta Reign and the San Francisco Shock before that. Like really, really bad showing. So, you know, they're definitely not an upper tier team, but yeah.
Yeah, so and also, you know, this means we have to have divergent brackets now too. If we post them, we both don't have the same bracket anymore.
Yeah.
We have divergent. But so that is all now moving from knockouts into quarters. So for the most part, though, our brackets are the same except for that one result. So let's go then to Shock, who is number 1 seed. And they also are getting the first pick of those players that of the people that advanced. What do you think for your bracket, I guess?
I think they picked the winner of Houston versus Dallas. It seems to make the most sense.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm going to say something that could be crazy, though, is that depending on because all these teams get to watch, they all get to watch the matchups, which is part of the advantage of getting a bye. I actually think Shock keeps a close eye on the Gladiators.
Oh, I mean,
the Gladiators match versus Defiant.
Certainly. Yeah.
I think you'll keep a close eye on that, because there is a real chance that Fuel Houston are both much better than Gladiators and Defiant currently.
God,
depending on how they play.
That's like the world is flipped upside down when you say things like, you know, like, again, this is we could see the Gladiators bouncing back. We could see them continuing their kind of tumble into the lower side of the rankings and performance. So, an interesting point. I think regardless of who the Shock pick, the Florida Mayhem are going to pick next, are going to pick the opposite of that. I think that Reign and Eternal are by far the better teams, where their results aren't even in question at all. But
yeah, at this point, Mayhem just picks I think Mayhem picks pretty much whoever does not get picked by Shock.
Yes, I think so.
So for me, if I were to make it definitive, I would say Shock picks the winner of, if we're being safer, probably Shock picks the winner of Outlaws Fuel.
Yep.
And Mayhem then picks the winner of Gladiators Defiant.
Yeah, I think so. And then Fusion, who would they pick?
Fusion then they only have 2 options, and I think I mean, and then also from there, you definitely pick the winner of Rain, and who do we say was going to be Rain
Uprising. We
and
said Rain,
Uprising?
Uprising. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely picked the winner of that. Rain have had a pretty rough schedule, but it's definitely Rain Uprising, and Valiant obviously gets stuck with the final, the winner between Eternal and whoever they pick, Justice. So,
yes. Which if Justice and Uprising make it out of knockouts, I will be seriously impressed. Okay, so we've got our brackets for the quarterfinals. We believe that Shock is either going to be playing the Fuel or the Outlaws. We think that the Valiant is going to be playing the Eternal, that Fusion is going to be playing Rain, and that the Mayhem are either going to be playing Gladiators or Toronto. Okay, so out of those, starting with Shock versus the Outlaws, predictions?
Shock should win that. They should win that. Now, one caveat here is that I think Shock actually are not. Well, actually, we'll get to the final, but Shock should win that. Let's just start with Shock. Let's start with Shock wins that. They win that match.
Shock wins that one. Next one, Valiant versus Eternal. Who you got?
Uprising win your 2-head, says Serapis. Okay, well, Serapis, you're going on the list that if you're right, we'll give you the VIP. We'll get
Serapis
the VIP if you're right.
4543.
You'll get the VIP of the channel if you're correct.
I got his name.
What's going on there? And then it was going to be Mayhem and Defiant Glads probably. So I would once again take Mayhem in that matchup, I think.
The Mayhem Gladiators one? Yes, I think Mayhem.
Yeah, I think I'd take Mayhem.
Yeah. Like Mayhem have certainly had an easy schedule, but I think versus Gladiators they can take them.
Yeah, I take Mayhem again, and then Fusion wins whoever they play.
Yeah,
whoever they play, I think Fusion wins.
I think Fusion wins the entire tournament. Spoiler alert, but
as
they beat Rain, and then who did we say? Sorry, Valiant Eternal.
It's gonna be Valiant. It's gonna be the winner of Valiant Eternal. It's gonna be Valiant Eternal, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I think Eternal wins that. Actually,
I would agree with that one. Yes.
Yeah, I think Eternal wins that.
That makes our semifinal bracket: Shock versus Eternal and Fusion versus Mayhem.
Yes. Fusion Mayhem. I have Fusion.
Yep.
You tend to, Fusion is a pretty clear winner. and then Shock Eternal.
I think this one's going to be closer than most people think. I think most people would just like snap decision to actually pick San Francisco Shock, but the San Francisco Shock haven't looked, that much better than the Paris Eternal. Like the Paris Eternal, I think Shock really also
struggle in freeform metas. Actually, it sounds interesting. It sounds weird to say it, but like seeing how Shock have had problems perfecting some of the metas at times, and there are some of their early results. And also I've known that Shock also have been putting in a lot more hours of scrim. Like they've been triple blocking. Well, a lot of teams actually haven't been full triple blocking. Because I think that they're a team that really knows how to perfect the meta and really get a great grasp on it. But I don't think they're actually great at understanding a beginning of a meta and really getting it down as perfectly with less time or a lesser amount of understanding. Like I actually think they struggle with different meta changes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Relative to other teams, at least. And
relative, like they're still top tier, but
Quadruple says external with the XZ, Sparkle, and Fielder are all going to be words. I give up. Okay, basically what I'm trying to say is that Sparkle will not be playing in the May tournament. His birthday is May 31st. So yeah, he will not be eligible to play for this tournament. But yes, absolutely, XZ and Fielder especially has been performing extremely well for the Eternal.
But I will say overall, Shock should probably still win it. I think overall Shock should still win it. Paris have some players on high ping. I think Shock's roster at this point should have a good enough grasp of the general. Because also, even though hero pools have been removed, the meta variations have not changed, right? Because the thing about hero pools, it doesn't actually change metas. All it does is artificially limit them. So, like, hero pools allow teams to experience all the different metas if X heroes were banned. But that means that essentially all the variations of a meta you could think of have been played out with hero pools. Because there are no balance changes happening. It's just eliminating certain heroes. So at this point, Shock should have a grasp of what all the possible meta combinations are and how best to work with them, I think. At least that's how they should be approaching it, in my view. So I do think Shock should be able to win that match. And we both agree Fusion will beat Mayhem, which leaves grand finals of Shock and Fusion.
That one's definitely going to be close. But I'm pretty confident in Fusion is going to be able to take it all. Fusion is looking Fusion is looking like a pretty dominant roster. I think the closest that we've seen to them being like challenged, I suppose, is actually the Paris Eternal versus the Philadelphia Fusion. But considering we have the San Francisco Shock beating them, a close one, but definitely going in favor of the Philadelphia Fusion to win the entire tournament.
Yeah, I'm in favor of Fusion, and here's my. Let's both put up a dark horse candidate too, Jayne. And also, let me read this comment from chat real quick. So, Just Very Tired says, Mayhem beats Fusion. I will fight everyone disagreeing with me. So, put him on the VIP list. Just Very Tired.
What's his name? Who said
Just that? Very Tired.
Just
predicts
very
Mayhem beats Fusion in our bracket.
I mean, that's not super insane to say.
I think it's relatively insane. I think Mayhem have had a pretty.
It's an outlier, but it's not predicting things like Charge is going to lose in the semis or Uprising wins knockouts. But I'll put him on the list.
we'll see, but put him on the list. So, but overall, I think Fusion wins. I think my dark horse candidate is Eternal. It's not really that dark horse of a candidate, but I think my candidate to win outside of Fusion is Eternal. Like if I were to pick a candidate that could win but isn't necessarily favored, it's Eternal.
Man, you picked first, so I have to pick a hard one, don't I?
I mean, you can pick the same one. So.
I mean, like I think that if you're especially going to be ranking the teams that are in the semifinals, I think that Fusion's first, Shock's second, Eternal's third, and Mayhem's fourth. So picking Eternal as the team that we don't predict to be in the finals to win it all. I think that Eternal is the smart pick. I think that that's going to be an easier match for them to upset. Mayhem beating the Fusion is way less likely than Eternal beating the Shock. But if I was to pick
a turtle.
Or a turtle.
Or a turtle beating
I didn't do my vocal warm-ups before this show. But if I was to pick a team that's not in the semifinals to win, I would pick the Atlanta Reign.
I think considering their route, Defiant could be a dark horse. I disagree.
I thought you were saying that. I was reading
the chat.
I was like, he's lost it. Cut the feed.
I was reading the chat. I was reading a comment from chat. But no, I'm not confident on Defiant. Also, we did have a mailbag, but we've run a little long already, and off break with Lando is after this, so we're probably gonna have to push the mailbag that we asked for last week to next week. So if you want to add to that mailbag, still, we'll just push it to next week, which is so. Well, actually, we'll add on to it. So our comments from last week were predictions for who wins the May tournament. So put in your candidates, put all of your crazy things in the YouTube comments for the video on Envytv.
Yeah. This is a good one. If you put the comment, is the YouTube going to be live in time? Basically, if you post a comment on YouTube with a crazy prediction when the video goes live tomorrow, and you don't edit it, because if you edit it, we can't tell when you edited it, but post a crazy prediction in the YouTube comment section of the video tomorrow, and if you're right, I mean, you're gonna get a prize, probably VIP. But if your prediction isn't crazy, of course, you don't win anything. So craziest predictions to come true during the May tournament, gonna win VIP.
And also, you could do it from there's generally someone that makes a Reddit thread on competitive Overwatch subreddit for our mailbag question answers, and that can be on there. And then we had a second question that I had added, and I couldn't remember what it was. Oh, and the secondary question, if you want to add on to that too, if you want to respond, is do characters like Orisa or Moira belong in an FPS game like Overwatch? Are they necessary for people to be intro components to FPSs? But most importantly, tell us your crazy candidate choices for winning the May tournament in the YouTube comment section or the Reddit thread.
And I actually don't think Homebound 11 is here today, so somebody else is going to have to make the Reddit thread. But just make the Reddit thread like craziest May month or May tournament predictions. Easy. No editing your comments.
No editing comments.
No editing comments.
If you edit it, we will shame you. We will shame you.
Shame. Okay. But okay. I think
that's it. We're out of time.
We're out of time. It's not Tuesday. We don't get to just completely just chill for the entire evening. So if you guys enjoyed today's episode, I'm happy for you. If you were watching on Twitter, I don't know what else.
He's like, I'm glad you gleaned some enjoyment from this.
In the chaos that is the world and the disappointment of the pandemic, I'm glad that you could find a tiny sliver of enjoyment and happiness today when you joined us during today's show to escape the troubles of the world, regardless of whether you're watching on Twitch, Twitter, or YouTube. And if you are enjoying escaping the troubles of the world on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, well, I hope you enjoyed that as well. But yes, that was your Thursday episode of Contested. Enjoy the main tournament. We will return next week, Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central. I'm Jayne, this is Avast, and this has been Contested.